Hi, I'm Sian Thomas from Integra Sales Solutions, a sales consultancy even for manufacturing businesses. And as part of the Conversations with series I'm producing, this week I'm going to be chatting to Steve Burrell from Unleashed Enterprises. We've been in contact with each other. Hi, good morning, Steve, first of all.
Yeah, good morning, Sian.
Morning. We've been in contact with each other for the last, I think, year or so, and have had a lot of great conversations around business processes. I'm not going to introduce you because I'm going to allow you to do that yourself. But it's, we actually met at when we could actually speak at physical events, and now we're doing everything online. And, the pandemic's disrupted the way we work.
Yes.
So as we shift, so now we've got a roadmap out of lockdown. Our focus is shifting and we're going to be working differently. So I just wanted to have this conversation with you just to get things from your perspective. So before we start, just a little introduction about yourself.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me, Sian. Yes, we actually met at the very last face-to-face event that I was able to do before COVID cut in. So yes, it was strange that, as you say, for the last 12 months, our conversations have been of this nature ever since. As I say, thanks for inviting me. And I'm Steve Burrell from Unleashed Enterprises. And I've spent a lifetime in manufacturing, and for the last 12 years have been running the business, delivering lean training and consultancy with hundreds of different organisations of all sizes and thousands of people, both trying to supply the underpinning knowledge, training for the people, and also helping to implement the systems and methods and procedures that bring it into being.
Fantastic. And like we said, we actually met when we could meet at live events. And as we know, there's been so much about how things have changed and how things are going to change going forward when we come out of lockdown and go back into the physical environment. So, the question that begs to be asked is, if lean has been so difficult for people to implement, even in, what do we call it? Calmer times, normal times, pre-normal, pre-now normal. Why do you feel now is such a good time?
Well, that's a really good question. It may not appear so to everybody. And again, for anybody that watches this and think, well, surely you must understand what's actually going on out there. I genuinely do. I've spoken to an awful lot of people and all my clients, and I do understand that these times have brought so many operational issues for people. People who have said to me, the thing of it is, every single thing that we do now consumes extra time and effort and energy. Yeah. We can assume nothing is easy anymore. And therefore, whilst we'd like to do these things, whilst we want to drive the business forward, whilst we want to try and improve what we do, it's incredibly difficult with everything else that's going on. And I fully understand that, and I kind of get it completely. But a few things to consider, and if anybody's ever tried to do this in the past and struggled, this will kind of, I hope, resonate. One of the problems everybody's always explained to me anyway, about why this has been difficult to do, why it's been difficult to get our people to understand the need and the benefit to improve our processes, because they always take well, what's wrong with what we've got? What we've always got kind of done's been okay. It's got us to where we are. Why should we change? And one of the great descriptions I had from a client was, the trouble is I haven't got a crisis. I can't point people to a crisis that says we need to do something different, otherwise we're going to struggle. Well, we've got one now. We have a crisis. And I genuinely think this is a really excellent time to get people to kind of pack behind the business's success. And they can now see the need to do things better than they've been done before, not least for their own safety. An awful lot of the improvements that I've seen over the last 12 months are where businesses have said, okay, let's set the workshop up in a particular way. And I'm sure most people have seen this in shops and pubs and restaurants. You remember shops and pubs and restaurants that we in this country. But when they were open between the lockdowns, there were all sorts of new systems and procedures that were put in place for ordering food or ordering drinks or booking tables that were designed to minimise the content and keep the place safer. Well, in the workplaces, it's no different. If people are going to be productive in these difficult times, then there's a need to make sure the workplace is somewhere that people can operate in safely and effectively. And what I found is that for the first time ever, necessarily the first time ever, but certainly in a way that has perhaps been difficult to get employees to buy into in the past, is that they look at their workplace and are prepared now to say, look, we can actually, we could move things around and make this a more comfortable, safer, more productive environment, because they have a vested interest. There's a kind of a buy-in and an engagement to the business being driven forward that you don't always see in, shall we say, calmer times. The other thing I think that people misunderstand about any kind of lean implementation, and I sometimes balk at using that word implementation because it sounds like a bolt-on.
It sounds, yes.
Does, when it really shouldn't be. It should be more about the way the business thinks and feels and behaves. But in the early days, there has to be a moment where it becomes something that arrives and begins to make a difference. And I think that everybody assumes that in those early days, it's all cost. It's all money out. It costs us money. It consumes time for no apparent benefit. Well, I've been involved over the piece in over 300 improvement projects. Lockdown gave me a chance to actually look back at those and pick them apart and have a look and see.
A lot of people had the time to reflect, yeah.
Which I'd never done before. I'd never actually done it. That wasn't the kind of way that I operate. I'm not someone that looks for an immediate amount of money and then says, I've made that money, because I don't ever make any money for anybody. It's the businesses and the people that work there that make the changes and make them stick. And so I think that the other thing at this time, when it's difficult, and it is incredibly difficult, and again, I appreciate there are some businesses, those in hospitality, attached directly to the aircraft industry, perhaps, or those sorts of places that say, do you know what, we are really going to struggle to keep our full workforce intact. But I say, if you can do some of these things, if you can look at a lean implementation, if you can get your people involved in looking at better ways to do things, there are genuine cash benefits to be yielded right now that could more than offset at least some salary. Because when the recovery comes, and it will, every business is going to need its skilled people, its experienced people. And if now in that kind of short window, and I know it's painful, where perhaps demand has diminished a little bit, I think lean programs can actually involve and engage people, can get them facing in the right direction behind the business aims, but can also find ways to make money right now that would more than justify them staying in the business, that when the recovery comes, they're still there.
I think you make a really good point, because from a lot of conversations, I've had a lot of conversations with businesses, as I'm sure you've had with businesses, and the whole situation has brought business plans probably about 10 years forward in terms of how we operate. So it's kind of it could be really good. This could be the impetus to which people say, right, okay, we've got to move forward. How can we come out of this situation in far better shape? So it's that kind of education piece which is hugely critical, and it's kind of I suppose it kind of touches upon my next question, really. So why has it proved to be so difficult for so many businesses to implement over the years?
Oh boy, why? Because we've not done it very well. I think that's the first thing you'd have to say and admit. And as I say, I've spent all my life in manufacturing, both for many years on the shop floor. And so a time when I was still on the shop floor was when the kind of lean concepts began to come at us. And I really think that many organizations that tried to implement it saw the benefits. They've been on a course, or they've been on a visit to a lean business, perhaps in the motor industry, and they come away with all of the benefits obvious, not perhaps recognizing that those companies have already done the hard yards. They've done all the difficult and disruptive things. They've had to get to where they are. And so many people that I've met over the piece want the benefit and think it's easy. And then when they actually embark upon it, they weren't ready for all of the difficulties that you're going to have to overcome to reach those goals. I mean, let's be clear. I mean, the concepts of lean systems, I think he called it lean manufacturing, which is what we tended to call it back in the day when it was first presented to us. But lean isn't just about manufacturing. Lean is about about business processes, regardless of what you do.
But I think it's because it's rooted in manufacturing industries. I think that's where the sort of misconception comes from.
Absolutely. So I think if you remember that when I gave that presentation that you saw, the last face-to-face, when my first slide said, we're not Nissan, you know.
Yeah.
And the reason I make that my first slide is because so many organizations that aren't motor industry, even if they're manufacturing, I'll turn up and begin to do the training. And I can feel the puzzlement in the room that, what are we doing here? And people have said to me, and I've worked with people in the care sector, in finance, in medical, and there's always somebody that kind of says, can I just, you do know what we do here, don't you? You do. We're not Nissan, you know, genuinely. Yeah. Something that's been said to me. So there is that first level of misunderstanding that it doesn't belong unless you make cars. And I promise you that's absolutely.
So in terms of like the catch-all terms then, you know, we alluded in the previous question, it's about that education piece. It's about sort of like changing perceptions of what it is. So, you know, fundamentally, you know, is there a catch-all, an umbrella term? You know, is it, you know, any business with a process, which is any business?
Yeah, quite so. I mean, some companies don't want me to use the word lean. There was an aerospace company down on the south coast that engaged me to deliver a lean program, and during the conversations leading up to it, they said, "That's fine. Would you mind not using the word lean in any of your resources?" And I said, "It's going to be kind of difficult to run a lean program and not why." And they said, "It's got a bit of a bad name here." And I think that's part of the problem, is because it's been implemented in the past in a rather, I don't know, draconian way, with some real over the top deliveries. And the biggest mistake that people have made, I think, is they've done it to people, not with them. That's one of the big fundamentals. So managements have perhaps not had a vision of what they'd like it to look like when it's done. They just kind of vaguely believe it's the right thing to do. They're not aware of their part in it very often. I've almost never been asked as a first pass to go into a business and train the management team, which is odd when you think about it, because they are, after all, the people that run the organisations. Most of my work begins to be with the rank and file, with staff who do the jobs.
You've quite nicely sort of preempted my next question then. So do you think it's important to actually involve everyone? And when I mean everyone employed within the organisation in the lean program?
Heavens, yes. Again, it is that, who's the most important? Nobody. They're all the most important. Because the people who run the organisations, the management, the senior leadership teams, they have to set the strategies. They have to make it a part of the business aims. And then they've got to communicate that. That's got to be communicated clearly and consistently down to the next level, to the managers, the people that are the next step closer to the people that do the jobs. Because if it's not clear to them that this is something that it's expected that they're going to do, it'll drop to the bottom of their priority list. Of course it will. It's not something that's going to form a part of their daily thinking in the same way as getting the work out of the door is, managing the people in the business, keeping people safe and those things. It becomes a peripheral or a background activity. Same with the supervisors. Those people are judged on what happens today and this week. Therefore, it's no good vaguely saying to them, "Oh yeah, we're going to do this thing," but the benefits are perhaps mildly intangible and you won't get them for 6 months. They need to understand that it's okay for them to involve people, and then the people. I mean, some of the concepts of lean go back decades, centuries, some of them. I mean, it was Adam Smith in 1776 who arguably the world's first ever production line he put together, and he produced a paper called The Wealth of Nations. And when he followed that up, there is a comment in there, I haven't got it to hand, but it's something to the effect that the only people that can find the best way to do a job are the people that do it all the time. So it's like 250-year-old thinking. It's not bleeding edge technology. And
a lot of it's, you know, coming from myself, you know, I'm a very sort of, you know, I promote sales processes and just having a structure into that. And I entirely agree. You know, a lot of the philosophies that people are sort of adopting these days are tried and tested. You know, they're like from the, you know, they've been around for at least 100, maybe a couple of 100 years. So there's nothing. new in that. It's just it's just how do you implement them to adapt to the systems we now have on board. So I just wanted to sort of like that kinds of interesting comments you made, because it stems, two questions stem from it. Is one of them is an example of where a company has implemented it successfully across the board, where they've sold it throughout. From your own experience, it'd be nice for you to share a story on that. And then from your own perspective, if there's an organization that how do what message do you convey to say, right, okay, this we've got to look at the whole sort of pan organizational implementation. So this is what I promote.
Yes. I mean, again, I mean, to be clear, the concepts of lean, of continuous improvement, are childishly simple. They're preposterously simple. Why would you not want to? Why would you choose to run a business that's full of unnecessary activities and waste and long-winded? You wouldn't select that. So when you stop and think about it, the concepts are ridiculously simple. The tools and techniques are not complicated. Doing it is. That's right. Very difficult, and it's very complicated, because people are already doing what they're doing. They're used to achieving what they achieve.
So why would they bring in? So what we're trying to do is remove complexities, and like I suppose I've seen this with projects I've worked on previously. Is that as an organisation grows, you bring on more people. They come in, they bring in their processes. So you've got this one company that's kind of operating like five in terms of its processes.
Absolutely so.
So how do you mitigate against that?
Okay, I'll try. Firstly, I recognise that completely. As a business, I never understood why it was people say it's a difficult time when businesses grow. I always thought it's a wonderful time. You make more money, everybody's great. But you're quite right. When you bring in, particularly it doesn't matter if you're going from 5 people to 50 people or 1,000 people to 3,000 people, kind of blending the new people with that core nucleus is an awful lot more complicated than people have often, kind of been aware of, I think. But certainly, if we look at, the examples, I know to say I've worked with lots and lots of different organisations over the piece. And if we take a business like Pneumatic International, who I've spent over 10 years with, and many people maybe won't know the name Pneumatic International, but they'll certainly know what they make. They make Henry the vacuum cleaner, a marvellous company in Chard. And I've been with them for a very, very, very long time, working with their different departments and their different levels of operation. But always the first thing to do is to overcome the skepticism, is to overcome the suspicion that whatever you're bringing to us is in some way designed to either make me work harder, lose some people, or steal the secrets that we've built up over the years. And it's none of those things. So once you've managed to dispel those fears, piece by piece. So I suppose if we wanted a specific example, probably one of the best, and a long time ago now, the production lines for the Henry vacuum cleaners are now semi-automated. They're cobot lines, so they're a combination of people and robots. But back in the day, they were purely a manual 7-man line. And we did some project work, as I say, it must be 10 years ago now, where we began, and everybody had always said, because the target was 472 pieces of ship. And people had said, well, that's what you can make. You can't make any more than that without working harder or putting more people into the process or something else. But when we involved the people who did the job, they found all sorts of little tricks and techniques. So actually, do you know what? We've never sort of said this because we've been very reluctant. But if you move that over here, so I didn't have to walk over. I mean, it's simple stuff. I find I run out of those on a regular basis, and then everything stops while I go and get some more. And they were really small, plain sight things. But the people that did the job suddenly found they felt empowered to speak up. And we made all of those small changes. It went up to I think 472 to 564. Now, when they make that many a day and sell that many, that was a significant amount of money. And I think in many ways it made a lot of people stand back and realise that this wasn't all about poking people with sharp sticks. That lean continuous improvement is about speaking to the people that do the job, getting them to try and come up with suggestions for better ways to do it, put it in place, give it a try and see what happens. And if everybody sees that they can do more without doing more, they're in. And piece by piece, once that barrier's down, there's a bit of a domino effect then, that the next place you go to, the next group of people you work with, they've heard. They've heard this is okay. It's you're going to be all right.
I suppose that's how you sort of like remove, like, that's how you encourage employee engagement. That sort of like addresses, getting everyone involved. And like I say, when you've been managing a company for so long, it's a shop floor. That's some of the best ideas. Like you say, just ask the people doing the job how they can make it better and get everyone involved in that. And then the net benefits, everyone's more motivated, productivity goes up. Just looking at the context in the current situation, there are obviously businesses that are struggling and that's suffering, and there's benefits that the lean techniques can bring to them, but the ones who are on solid ground and have got really strong foundations for growth, then this is all stuff that they can think, how do we get there quicker? How do we sort of remove the stuff that is going to fundamentally cause friction and hold us back?
There are, again, I guess you're kind of right to identify those kind of two separate situations that people find themselves in, but ultimately it's still the right thing to do, regardless of whether or not you're kind of fighting a rearguard action or you're looking to push forward. It'll still bring you those benefits. One of the biggest impediments, I think, to any organisation moving forward is often at that kind of supervisory level. Not because supervisors are bad people, heavens
No, not at all.
not, but often because they're in charge of what goes on, and they're pressurised from the top to achieve today, and they're looked upon as, from the guys on the shop floor all too often as the people that never let them have a say in what goes on. If not me, but if the business can make it clear to those people, it's okay. We will not think you're a poor supervisor if an improvement is put in place that you haven't thought of, that it's come from your people. Quite the opposite. We see that as a positive, as a beneficial thing. That would reflect well on you as a supervisor. It would demonstrate your skill and open-mindedness, not any form of incompetence. And I know that might sound the most obvious thing in the world, but often people don't say those things, and so therefore it's not absolutely clear. The difficulty, I grant you, is this, as I say, the rearguard action. And that's not because it's the wrong thing to do. It's never the wrong thing to do. But because I recognise, as I said earlier, how difficult it is to try and bring ideas to the fore at a time when we're desperately struggling with what we've got. But if we stop and think for a moment about what that might mean to hospitality businesses, again, to take those as a great example, because the minute the government says you can open the doors, they want people through at the fastest and safest rate they can. Now, the interesting thing about that is, again, you may have observed this through the lockdown, systems were put in place that I were actually better than that they were put in because of COVID. But the truth is they were smoother, more efficient, more customer friendly than some of the old ones. And I'll give you an example. A pub that does excellent food that we went to between the lockdowns had implemented a system, not because they thought it would make the process better, but to keep people safe, whereby you could walk up, go and sit at a table in the garden, QR code on the table, zap the QR code, order your drink at the table, and if somebody brought it out to you. You could order your dinner and arrange what table number you were going to walk into inside the restaurant, hands-free. And it was brilliant. It was a brilliant system that was much nicer, much more customer friendly. And I said to one of the staff, how are you finding this? And they said, we all at the beginning, we thought, oh, it's just going to be a nightmare, but it works really well. We're quite surprised. Now, my only fear for them and anybody else that's identified ways of making things better today is that when this is all over, they'll not realise how good those things were and they'll go back to what they did before. So I think this is a lot of change.
But it sounds like there's absolutely a lot of benefits to come out of this situation for exactly the reasons that you've just mentioned, and a great deal of industries that are going to sort of to benefit from applying the principles in some ways. So it just, sort of, it kind of leads me to the next question, is that if we accept that recovery from the pandemic will pose so many problems, so, without taking on a new initiative, how can the lean program be simplified? I think you might have touched upon it earlier, but I
Yeah.
think, everyone's got this perception that, there's a lot of involved. So, we're all trying to steady the ship. So how can we avoid taking on more complications?
I mean, again, it's a very good question. But again, if you stop and think about it, if you, what I said before, I meant an awful lot of people engage me to do work with only one thing in their mind. Go and train some people, and then we'll probably get some benefits. But it's not been part of a structure. It's not been part of an overall plan.
Yeah.
I think that's the way that people can do this, is to step away, and before you just start training, shop floor operators in kind of waste elimination and 5S and all of the good things that are inside lean programs, which are necessary, is to look at how are we going to do this, to break it down to the steps. And for me, it's assessment at the front end before you begin. Assess where you are. You may already have a huge amount of skills. It's astonishing how people don't know. I worked with a care home once where one of the staff who was looking after the old folks in the care home, I was talking to him, I thought, he sounds like he knows a bit about this. And he said, I used to run a Dodge dealership in the States. And you go, wow, people don't even look and see what they've already got. So assess what you've got and what you need in terms of skills and understanding.
Absolutely.
Then at a senior level, set the strategies. Make it clear that it's important. Make it clear that it's not optional to carry waste in systems, that this is going to be something that is going to become a part of what we do. Then you have to train people, and then you train people to what they need.
So what you're saying is sometimes people go about it in the wrong order then?
Wrong is, I'm always pleased. I'm always pleased when people do anything to bring it into being. And at least if I've started in what we'll call the wrong place, I can always encourage other things to be brought into place, which is not unusual.
Sure.
But if we're talking what would simplify it in the heads of the people that want it to be, then plan it in that way. Get an assessment of where you are, what you've got. We've developed our own tools for doing that. Set the strategies and make it clear to people that this is what's going to happen. Then train people, then assign some people who are going to do this after I'm gone, because I shouldn't be there forever. People like me shouldn't be. We're not part of the business.
Yes.
But if you don't train people who understand it and can ringmaster it, can help people, can facilitate projects, then it'll die. I've watched that happen too. And then you've got to have a system. And that's the other thing that people tend to forget, is that you can train as many people as you like. You can give people as much of a excitement and engagement. But if there's no way for them to see something and propose an idea and then have the chance to carry it through, if there's no mechanism, then it won't happen. And any one thing, sometimes people want the magic bullet, the silver bullet. What's the one thing I can do to bring this into being? There isn't one thing. You need to assess, you need to strategize, you need to train, you need to have champions who are going to take it forward for you, and then you need a system that they can operate in, that everybody buys into. Then I always describe that as, if you can do that as a plan, and it depends how big your business is and how many people you've got, and as to how long that takes. But if we say, I don't know, on an SME, you're talking maybe 2 years to get that done, then you've got a system that's up on Bambi legs. It's not robust, it's not bulletproof, but it's ready now to build on and begin to develop. But without any of those things, you come up short.
So as long as you kind of know where you're going, and it doesn't have to, it's a continuous improvement, and it's exactly
clues in the name. It really is, yeah, absolutely.
No, I just wanted to, that word, that phrase dropped into my head, and I just wanted to, just wanted to bring it up, because exactly, I think people people can almost kind of feel they overwhelm in terms of, they think they've got to get too much done too soon, and they don't realize it's a phased step.
Exactly that. I mean, the very word, and I'm not going to go into kind of Japanesey stuff in a chat like this, but the term continuous improvement has been in our quality standards, ISO 9000, and before that BS 5750, quality standards, ever since they were first written as commercial documents in 1987. when they kind of really began to gather some pace. It's always been there. It's not new language, and yet people don't kind of listen to what it says. It's continuous improvement. It isn't from here, you know, zero to hero. Nobody's going to do that and sustain it. It's about establishing something and building on it.
But that's you know, and again, this is why this kind of nicely flows into the next question, is that many people report things like, you know, they on one hand, you know, we've covered, you know, people might be skeptical towards applying these principles and towards a whole methodology, but then, you know, you can almost get the flip side of that, where they're almost too enthusiastic, and you know, sort of, and everything's just met with this, you know, people want to get things done, but then that enthusiasm wanes over time. So we kind of touched upon that, but I'm just wondering if there's anything that you wanted to emphasize.
I mean, absolutely. In many ways, what I just described there as the kind of structure, about halfway through that is when you get to that peak of enthusiasm. Mm-hmm. It's when you know, kind of, there's been an assessment, the business has declared it's going to happen. You've done the training and begun to break down those barriers. So once you can get over the barriers to change, the skepticisms, the fears, and the doubts that people have got, then you do begin to see a bit of a blue touch paper being lit. You see people thinking, crikey, they mean it, that they mean this, and I'm allowed to speak up. And my voice that I've been saying for years, this mm-hmm. needs to be done. It's okay. I can, and you can begin to see that kind of build, and surprisingly fast. In terms of it being sustainable, that moment will disappear if there isn't anybody in the business to help make it happen in the future, and no system for them to use to do that. That enthusiasm will come to a point where it's got nowhere to go. It's got nothing to buy into. Yeah. And I think that's such an important thing. I was lucky enough, should I say last year, but we've lost a whole year. This was in 2019, to go to a conference in Berlin. And I heard a guy speaking over there from a Belgian company called Datweiler. And he made a brilliant observation. He said that they implemented lean, and they were struggling because there was a skepticism from the shop floor and a bit of a lack of buy-in. He said, and we did something that in hindsight was brilliant. And his words, not mine. He said, we took two old guys who were on the shop floor and we taught them what to do, and they understood it, they got it. He said, and then we took them out of manufacturing and gave them the job as facilitators for the continuous improvement program. He said, and it changed everything, because if it was good enough for them, it's good enough for everybody else. They were trusted, experienced employees who have gone, no guys, there's nothing to fear. This is great. And if you need help, I'll help you. And it was the defining factor. So in the kind of carrying it forward and making it something that becomes, people say, oh, it's cultural for Nissan. Well, it wasn't initially. It takes time for these.
Culture develops. You create the culture, don't you?
Exactly that, and it's not a 5-minute thing. It need not be generational, but you can change rules tomorrow. You can't change culture tomorrow. You've got to win your spurs. You've got to prove that this is the right thing to do. You've got to build confidence and trust that no one's going to be disadvantaged as a result of this. And then slowly the habits and the behaviours begin to change. You can change the climate of a place by putting instant things in place that give people a little bit of a lift. Yeah, that's only that's not permanent. Culture change is permanent, is perhaps the wrong word, but it certainly becomes a far more concrete thing over time.
So it's just a case you just really need to commit to that, and then just kind of have point, just really to keep on top of it. And
commitment is the word. Commit. It's exactly that. It is once you've committed to it, there should be no going back.
And then I suppose, if people see the net benefits, there's some organisations that do this fantastically well, is that, because obviously the management will see, from the reporting side, all the numbers go in the right direction. If the numbers go in the right direction, there's an incentive, there's kind of a company-wide, sort of recognition scheme that addresses all of that. So there's different, I think, although, there's methodologies that you can be stewarded along, the company can use its own discretion to actually make its implementation a huge success. So I just want, kind of getting sort of close to the, wrapping this up, but, So, just thinking that, it's all well and good. But for those who have to get the jobs done, the products made and services delivered, how are they going to find the time to involve the staff and keep customers happy? Because,
That's,
we touched upon the staff, but we're looking at the customer side.
yeah, I mean, that is the $64,000 question, of course. That's the thing, that's the moment at which, without genuine commitment, without full understanding of the potential benefits, and there's several, other than just the money you make out of it. You mentioned employee engagement a while ago, and it's become almost a bit of a hackneyed phrase, which is a shame because it's really, really important to me. But engaged, happy employees will produce more for you. Engaged, happy employees won't be looking in the local paper on a Thursday. Do they still do that? Do they still have a local paper on a Thursday with jobs in, or on Indeed.com or Glassdoor?
I think we're talking about a different era.
Maybe so, yeah. But that's fair enough. And every time they go, if people become disillusioned and leave, people think, I'll get some more. It's expensive. It's an expensive hobby to keep changing people and retraining them and having costs associated with that. So there's kind of all sorts of residual benefits that you are going to get. But it is those kind of hard yards. It's not an easy implementation. I say the concept's simple. The execution can be very, very difficult. So I think it's making sure that plan's in place and it's understood. And come the moments when you say, so how? I'm a production manager. I've got targets on the wall. That's a conversation that I have every day with my boss, with my team leaders. Well, you've got to introduce continuous improvement into that conversation every day as well. Otherwise, it will sit right at the back. It'll be in any other business issue in all the meetings, and it won't happen. Then you've got to accept that there might be moments you've got to invest in it. You may have to spend. One organisation that I work with has now allowed overtime to be used for continuous improvement. Now, one or two people might have just turned off there at the thought of what? But how much overtime is spent doing rework? How much overtime is spent doing things that we should have got done in the work day, but we didn't because the systems and processes and procedures that we've got in place made it difficult because of something that happened today or an extra bit of pressure. By allowing, you've got to find a way, and sometimes that might be rerouting processes. It might be increasing the amount of people on site at the moment to cover people that are in training or doing projects. It might mean overtime. It might mean batching up higher than I would normally choose to do. So there's stuff to send to a customer while you then stop a line or reorganize an area. But it's about coming up with those creative ways to say, okay, we can go and do that, but there is a cost. The other thing, and this is why I say that the overall plan and commitment is important, is because if a supervisor takes that to a manager and the manager takes that to a senior leader and the senior leader says no, well, then you weren't committed. You haven't understood how important this is to drive it forward, and that there will be moments of, okay, I'll spend that, or I'll allow that to happen for the greater good. It's like I keep saying it, the concepts are simple, the implementation isn't always, and now and again there are difficult decisions that have to get made and backed right the way to the top.
No, that's absolutely. What's they say? Business is simple, but it's not easy. That's that old adage.
Exactly right.
But from the now it's not now it's become important, but it's always been important. But I think organisations are getting more into their customers' mind, the benefits of the customer, because ultimately, without a customer, we don't have a business. So how does this manifest? From a customer's point of view, from your experience?
Oh boy, it was. Glad you asked me that.
Kind of worms.
For anybody that's ever trained with me, I always apologise when we start. I always apologise because I always say, if you understand this, if this is something that really gets under your skin, it will ruin your life, because nothing ever looks the same again. All you can ever see wherever you go, whether it's to a hotel or a concert or a restaurant, is what could be better than it is now. It's like a disease that you have that you simply can't shift. And so I think it is, but also it is that, it's that understanding that everything we do could be a little bit better than it is now. What are the things that are around us, often, as I said before, in plain sight, that we could be doing a little bit better than we are now? And how do we go about doing that? It is an issue. So there are many things that for instance, just recently I was doing a project with in this way, in truth, without actually being on site, which I wasn't sure would work, but it's worked far better than I expected. And I was talking to a team leader about his area of operation, and I said to him, "Can you tell me, why does it exist? Why does your place of work even exist?" And he stopped and he said, "I don't know. I've never really thought about it." And it was a logistics thing. And he said, I never really thought. It's just the job that we've always had. Now, once you begin to challenge people of that nature on that level, they go away and look at what they do, and there's suddenly a genuine vested interest, not just in establishment, but you know what, we do a really important job.
Yeah.
We do something, and right now we could do it better. It was a great moment and absolutely truly, the three guys who work for him they're logistics people, move material around the site. And the report back we had after about 6 weeks of trying one or two things is they're actually enjoying life more now because their days go quicker. They've got more to do, and their lives are better balanced, which is brilliant. It's a brilliant.
Then that exudes, that communicates in your interaction with their customers. Every sort of like touch point. To use your get a little bit conscious of time now, but just to use your example.
Just quickly, let me give you one more direct point about the customer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that the thing that I'm aware of is that any business that carries waste, any poor practices, any unnecessary activity, high levels of scrap, high levels of staff turnover, anything that costs the business money that doesn't convert itself into something valuable for a customer, has got to go somewhere. You've got to, it doesn't disappear. That cost that the business has borne. So they do one or two things. It either comes out of the profit or it goes into the cost of the products and services.
Yeah.
Therefore, if you have an inefficient business, or you have business inefficiencies, perhaps I should say, that you say, well, we'll just cost it into the product cost. If your unit cost then goes up by 5%, maybe that won't hurt. But if it does it again next year, then suddenly your product in the marketplace is beginning to become prohibitively expensive.
Oh, wow.
So it's one of those things in terms of what does the customer see from a lean organisation? It sees stability. It sees value for money. And I think more and more, customers are getting very good at spotting that. We are as customers, and certainly bigger organisations.
Oh, absolutely. Well, with information so widely available, so it's from that point.
Absolutely.
And also from, we're in a very global market as well. So it's not just competing in the UK, it's competing globally, and also providing, customers are willing to pay if they get a great experience, but they've got to see that value for money. And I think this is an absolutely fascinating conversations. I think we're both quite talkative. We could talk about this later sometimes.
It's the time limit that was always going to be the problem. It's something that I feel incredibly passionate about, having had a lifetime in industry and watched all the things we did wrong when I was younger. The word passion again is kind of overused these days, but it is a genuine passion to not let that happen again, to help organisations be as great as they can be. That's kind of what I'm always keen to do.
I'm just going to say, in terms of when I publish this video, I'm going to put I'm going to tag you into it so people can have a direct conversation with you and your company website.
Okay.
So we've got that information widely available, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people interested to learn some more. But I'm just trying to think as a kind of a final note. Then, in terms of coming out of the pandemic, we've got 3.5 months in this situation. So do you have a final, in terms of in context of lean principles, lockdown situation, do you have any sort of final observation you want to share?
Only in that, I think, to go back to what I said at the beginning, it's very glib and easy of me to say, oh, this is a good moment. There's an opportunity to do that, to implement these things now because of the crisis, because of the employee buy-in, because of the potential benefits you can bring. But like I said at the beginning, I do understand how difficult it is. What I would say to organisations, particularly anybody that would like chat. I'd love to talk to anybody about their own experiences and issues to see if I can help in any way at all. But I think that now is, without any question, the time to be planning it. I recognise that from a deployment point of view, and I'm speaking to a lot of people through LinkedIn now who are saying, well, we can't do anything. I think now we've got June the 21st, haven't we, as very much a watershed moment. Absolutely. And I think for an awful lot of people, they're kind of saying, oh, I'm not really looking to do anything. My own humble opinion and my advice to everybody would be, now is a great time to start the conversation. Now is a great time to start looking at the assessment side of it, what you have around you already, where the areas of strength and weakness are, and begin to plan for how it would happen post-pandemic. But there are some people who are quite happy to move forward now. But I think that would be a sensible message to give to people, is I think many of us that do this understand how difficult your lives have been, heaven knows. But now is a great moment to open conversations and start the planning.
I think that's across the board in terms of everything. You've got to act now, because these things take time to start taking effect. And if you don't act now, effectively you're going to be left behind.
One of my customers' favourite sayings at Pneumatic is, a year from now, we'll wish we'd started this today.
100%.
And it's a, as you said, I think when we first came on before the call started, you said, crikey, where's the time gone since we last spoke? And there it is. It'll tumble by again. And a year from now, if you don't do something now, you'll wish you had.
Indeed. But this has been a pleasure as always. Love talking to you, Steve. And, you know, and thank you very much.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Sean. Thank you very much indeed for inviting me.
Take care now.
Bye-bye now.
Right.